What if a king over 60 years old could stare down an army of millions with just 300 men? What if a slave armed with a kitchen knife could make the mighty Rome tremble? Could you stand in their shoes and fight like they did? Welcome back to Learn English with Stories 365. Today, we're talking about two legendary warriors, Leonidas, the fearless Spartan king, and Spartacus, the slave who defied an empire. Two epic battles for freedom are coming up. But here's the question that's burning. Who fought braver? And what can their stories teach you about courage and English? Let's jump right in. Did you know Leonidas was over 60 when he faced the Persians at Thermopylae? Forget the movies showing him young. He was a tough old warrior. And Spartacus? Some say he was a Roman soldier before they chained him up as a slave. How crazy is that twist? Now, imagine this. Would you hold your ground against impossible odds like Leonidas? Or rise up with nothing but hope like Spartacus? These two heroes took on the impossible. But here's the catch. One battled for glory, the other for freedom. Which would you fight for? By the end of this video, you'll uncover their secret weapons, their greatest mistakes, and over 25 English words to sound as brave as they were. So, pick up your shield or your kitchen knife and let's charge into the story. Part 1. The Highlight Reel. Imagine a narrow pass between cliffs, the air thick with tension, and a tiny army of 300 Spartans facing a sea of Persian soldiers. This is Thermopylae, the place where Leonidas, the Spartan king, made his greatest stand. The Persians demanded he give up his weapons, but Leonidas just looked at them and said, "Come and take them." Can you feel the power in those words? He knew his small group couldn't win forever against millions, but he didn't back down. Instead, he turned that narrow pass into a trap. His 300 Spartans held the line for days, fighting with spears and shields, giving the rest of Greece time to prepare for the bigger war. Leonidas's last stand wasn't about surviving. It was about sacrifice. He gave his life so others could win later. That's the kind of bravery that echoes through time. Think about it. Standing there, outnumbered, but never outmatched. His courage wasn't just in fighting. It was in knowing when to make the hardest choice. Now, let's switch scenes. Picture a dusty gladiator school in ancient Rome, where slaves were forced to fight for entertainment. This is where Spartacus made his mark. He wasn't a king with an army. He was a slave with a dream. One day, he'd had enough. He grabbed whatever he could find, kitchen knives, sticks, anything, and led a revolt. That spark turned into a fire. Soon, he wasn't alone. Over 70,000 slaves joined him, men and women from all over, breaking their chains and fighting for freedom. For 2 whole years, Spartacus led them across Italy, beating Roman armies sent to stop him. There's this legendary moment when he was caught, and his followers could have run. Instead, they stood up one by one, shouting, "I am Spartacus." They wouldn't let him face the punishment alone. That's unity, turning weakness into strength. Spartacus didn't have fancy armor or a throne, but he had something bigger. People who believed in him. He didn't just fight battles. He built a rebellion that Rome couldn't forget. So, let's feel the difference between these two. Leonidas was a king who died to protect his homeland. He stood tall in his last stand, a wall of defiance against an empire. Spartacus was a slave who lived to destroy an empire. He broke free and kept running, turning every step into a victory for freedom. One faced death with honor, the other cheated death with hope. Which hits you harder? A king holding the line, or a slave breaking the chains? Both were brave, but their battles feel so different. Leonidas's story is like a shield, strong, steady, unbreakable until the end. Spartacus's story is like a flame, wild, spreading, impossible to hold down. They both defied the odds, and that's what makes them legends. Let's sneak in some English words you'll hear more about later. Words like last stand. That's what Leonidas did, fighting until the very end. Then there's rebellion. Spartacus started one, a big fight against the people in charge. Legacy is another. It's what they left behind, the stories we still tell today. Defiance means saying no to fear, like both of them did. And unity, that's the power of sticking together, like Spartacus showed with his army of slaves. You'll also hear phrases like hold the line, something Leonidas might have shouted to his Spartans, or break the chains, the cry of Spartacus and his rebels. These words and phrases aren't just cool. They're tools to make you sound brave, too. But here's the thing. How did these two men, one a king, the other a slave, become legends? Their greatest moments are just the start. To really understand their bravery, we need to go back, way back. Leonidas didn't just wake up one day ready to face the Persians. He was shaped by years of tough Spartan training. And Spartacus, he didn't start as a rebel leader. He had to claw his way out of a life in chains. Their stories are full of surprises, and we're about to rewind and see how it all began. Who were they before the battles? What made them strong enough to take on the impossible? That's what's coming next. Get ready to dive deeper into their worlds. Two paths, two kinds of courage, and a whole lot of English to learn along the way. Part 2. Leonidas's Background. Let's travel back to ancient Sparta. a land of warriors where Leonidas was born. This wasn't an easy place to grow up. Sparta was all about strength, discipline, and fighting. From the time he was a little boy, Leonidas didn't get to play games or relax like other kids. Instead, he was sent to something called the agoge. That's the Spartan military training, and it was tough. Imagine this. Young boys running through freezing cold mountains, learning to fight with spears, and training to never show fear. They didn't even get much food. Sometimes they had to steal it just to survive. The Spartans believed this made them stronger. If you fell behind or complained, you were out. Leonidas didn't just survive this, he became one of the best. That's how he grew into the king who could face anything, even an army of millions. Fast forward to when Leonidas was over 60 years old. He was king now, and Sparta faced its biggest test. The Persians, led by a guy named Xerxes, were coming to take over Greece. Their army was huge, like a giant wave ready to crash over everything. Leonidas knew he couldn't let that happen. So, he took 300 of his best Spartan soldiers and marched to a place called Thermopylae. Why there? Thermopylae is a narrow pass between cliffs and the sea. It's so tight that a big army can't all attack at once. Leonidas was smart. He picked this spot to make the Persians' numbers useless. His plan was to hold them back as long as he could. Picture it. 300 Spartans standing shoulder to shoulder, their shields locked together in a tight formation called a phalanx. That's when soldiers line up so close, they're like a living wall. With their long spears and bronze armor, they were ready to fight. The Persians came, thousands and thousands of them, demanding Leonidas give up. But he just said, "Come and take them." For days, his Spartans held that pass. Wave after wave of enemies crashed against them, but the phalanx didn't break. This wasn't just about winning. It was about buying time. Leonidas knew other Greek cities needed days to get their armies ready. Every hour he held Thermopylae was an hour closer to saving Greece. That's what we call sacrifice, giving up something big, like your life, for something even bigger. In the end, a traitor showed the Persians a secret path around the cliffs. Leonidas and his 300 were surrounded. They fought until the last man, but their stand wasn't for nothing. Greece had time to fight back later and win. Here's a cool fact. Spartan mothers had a saying for their sons going to war. They'd tell them, "Return with your shield," or "on it." That meant come back a winner, or die trying, no running away allowed. Can you imagine hearing that from your mom? It shows how deep their honor code was. Spartans lived for discipline and loyalty. Losing a shield was a disgrace, because it meant you dropped it to run. Coming back on it meant you died bravely, carried home by your friends. Leonidas lived this code his whole life. He didn't just fight at Thermopylae. He became a legend there, a story told for thousands of years. Let's talk about some English words from Leonidas's world. First, there's phalanx, that tight formation that made Spartans so strong. Then, honor code, the rules they lived by, all about courage and loyalty. Sacrifice is giving up something important, like Leonidas did for Greece. Discipline means training hard and staying focused, the Spartan way. And legend, that's what Leonidas became, a name that never fades. You'll hear phrases too, like outnumbered but never outmatched. That's what Leonidas proved at Thermopylae. Numbers didn't scare him. Or how about, a king's duty is to his people? That's why he fought, to protect Sparta. These words and phrases are yours now. Use them to sound as tough as a Spartan. So, that's Leonidas's story before his last stand. He wasn't just born brave. He was made that way through years of hard training and a life of duty. Next, we'll flip to Spartacus, a man who started with nothing but chains and turned into a nightmare for Rome. How did he do it? Get ready! His background is coming up, and it's a wild ride. Part 3. Spartacus's Background. Let's step into the dusty, brutal world of ancient Rome, where Spartacus began his story. He wasn't born a king or a warrior with a shield. He started as a prisoner. Some say he might have been a soldier once, fighting for Rome. But something went wrong. Maybe he ran from battle, or maybe he got caught by the wrong people. Whatever happened, Rome turned on him. They took away his freedom and made him a slave. Can you imagine that? Going from carrying a sword to wearing chains, he was sold to a gladiator school, a place where slaves were forced to fight and die for fun. Picture this: a hot, crowded training ground, men swinging swords at each other, knowing every fight could be their last. That's where Spartacus learned to survive. But Spartacus wasn't the type to give up. One day, he'd had enough of the whips and the blood. He looked around at the other slaves, men from different lands, speaking different languages, and saw a chance. With nothing but kitchen knives and whatever they could grab, he led a revolt. That's when a small group of slaves fought back against their guards. They didn't have armor or spears, just guts and a dream of freedom. They broke out of that school and ran into the wild. It started with just a few dozen, but word spread fast. Slaves everywhere heard about Spartacus and joined him. Soon, he had thousands following him, 70,000 at his peak. Men, women, even families, all ready to fight for a life without chains. Spartacus didn't fight like a normal general. He couldn't line up in a phalanx like Leonidas. His army didn't have that kind of training or gear. Instead, he used guerrilla tactics. That means quick, sneaky attacks, hit the enemy hard, and disappear before they can hit back. Rome sent armies to crush him, but Spartacus was too clever. One time, he and his rebels were trapped on a cliff with Roman soldiers below. Most people would surrender, right? Not Spartacus. He had his people make ropes out of vines growing nearby. They climbed down the cliffs at night, quiet as shadows, and ambushed the Romans from behind. Can you picture that? Slaves with vine ropes beating a trained army? That's the kind of leader he was. Resourceful, bold, and never out of ideas. For 2 years, Spartacus kept winning. His army grew, moving across Italy, taking food and weapons from the Romans they beat. He didn't have a homeland to defend like Leonidas. He wanted to destroy the empire that enslaved him. Every victory was a message. Freedom isn't given, it's taken. Rome was scared. They called him a bandit, a monster, anything to make him sound small. But to the slaves, he was a hero. He turned a bunch of broken people into a rebellion that shook the world. In the end, Rome sent their best general Crassus with a massive army to stop him. Spartacus fought hard, but he was trapped and killed in battle. His body was lost, but his name lived on. He didn't win freedom for himself, but he showed others it was possible. Here's a wild fact. Spartacus's cliff escape with those vine ropes really happened. It's one of the coolest tricks in history. His rebels didn't have fancy tools. They used what they could find. That's what made him so dangerous to Rome. He didn't need a throne or a crown to lead. He led with hope, and that was enough to keep his people fighting. Now, let's grab some English words from Spartacus's story. Gladiator is what he was forced to be, a fighter in the arena. Oppression is the heavy weight of slavery he lived under. Revolt is what he started, a big fight against the people in charge. Guerrilla tactics are those clever, sneaky moves he used to win battles. And liberation is what he wanted, freedom for everyone in chains. You'll hear phrases, too, like, from slave to general. That's Spartacus's journey in 4 words. Or, freedom isn't given, it's taken. That's what he believed and fought for. These words and phrases are yours now. Use them to sound as fierce as Spartacus. So that's how Spartacus went from a slave to a legend. He didn't have Leonidas's training or army, but he had a fire inside him that Rome couldn't put out. Next, we'll compare these 2 heroes side by side. How did their leadership styles stack up? Get ready. It's about to get epic. Part 4. Leadership. Let's put Leonidas and Spartacus side by side and see how they led their people. First up, leadership. These 2 were bosses in totally different ways, but both got their followers to fight against crazy odds. Leonidas was a king, born and trained to lead. In Sparta, everything was strict and organized. Picture this: a line of soldiers with shields locked, moving like one big machine. That's how he led his elite Spartans at Thermopylae. He had 300 of the best fighters Greece ever saw. Guys who'd been through the agouge, that brutal training we talked about. They didn't mess around. Leonidas gave an order, and they followed it without blinking. Why? Because Sparta had a hierarchy. That means a clear chain of command. King at the top, soldiers below, all working like clockwork. He didn't have to beg or convince them. His men were raised to obey and fight to the death. It was all about discipline and trust in their leader. Now, think about how Leonidas stood at Thermopylae. He didn't shout fancy speeches every 5 minutes. He led by example when he said, "Come and take them." To the Persians, his Spartans saw a king who wasn't afraid. That's powerful. He didn't hide behind his men. He fought right there with them, shield up, spear ready. His leadership was like a rock, steady, strong, and unshakable. He knew exactly what he wanted: hold the pass, protect Greece. Every move was planned, every order sharp. His 300 trusted him because he'd earned it through years of proving he was tough as nails. That trust turned a tiny group into a wall the Persians couldn't break. Not at first, anyway. Leonidas's style was all about strategy and keeping things tight. He didn't need a big army because his small one was perfect. Switch gears to Spartacus. His leadership? Total opposite. He wasn't a king with a crown. He was a slave with nothing. No fancy training, no elite soldiers, just a wild mix of people who'd been beaten down by Rome. His army wasn't 300. It grew to 70,000. But these weren't pros. They were slaves from all over. Different languages, different skills. No shields or spears at first. How do you lead a group like that? Spartacus did it with heart. He didn't have a hierarchy handed to him. He built one from scratch. He inspired them. Imagine him standing on a rock, holding up a broken chain, yelling, "We're free if we fight." That's the kind of fire he brought. His people didn't follow because they had to. They followed because they wanted to. Spartacus couldn't just say, "Line up and march," like Leonidas. His crew wasn't built for that. Instead, he united them through strength in diversity. He had farmers, cooks, gladiators, all different, but all angry at Rome. He turned that mess into a family. When he won battles, he shared the loot, food, weapons, hope. That kept them loyal. Think about the "I am Spartacus" moment. His followers didn't let him stand alone. They claimed his name to protect him. That's not just loyalty. That's love. Spartacus led by showing them a dream, a life without chains. He didn't have a rule book or a throne, but he had trust too. Trust he earned by fighting beside them, not above them. His leadership was like a storm, messy, loud, and impossible to stop. So, what's the big difference? Leonidas led with order. His Spartans were a machine, built to obey. Spartacus led with chaos. His slaves were a wave, crashing wherever he pointed. Leonidas had strategy from years of training. Spartacus had to make it up as he went, inspiring people who'd never fought before. Both worked. Leonidas held Thermopylae because his men trusted his plan. Spartacus beat Rome's armies because his people trusted his vision. One was a king commanding the best. The other was a slave lifting up the broken. Which style would you pick? Here's some English to grab from this. Hierarchy is that top-down order Leonidas used. Loyalty is what both had. Their people stuck with them. Inspire is what Spartacus did, lighting a fire in his rebels. Strategy is Leonidas's smart planning, and trust is what held both armies together. Phrases: lead by example, Leonidas in the front line. Strength in diversity, Spartacus uniting everyone. These are yours now. Use them to lead like a warrior. That's leadership, round 1. Next, we'll compare their battles. Spears versus knives. Open fields versus sneaky raids. Get ready. It's coming up. Part 5. Battles. Now let's dive into the battles. How Leonidas and Spartacus fought their wars. These two faced totally different enemies in totally different ways, but both proved they were masters of the fight. First, Leonidas. His big moment was at Thermopylae, and it was all about open battle. Picture this: a narrow pass, cliffs on one side, sea on the other, and 300 Spartans lined up with their shields locked tight. They used spears, long, sharp, perfect, for stabbing from behind a wall of bronze. Their shields were huge, covering them head to knee, and they stood in that phalanx formation we talked about. It was like a human tank. The Persians came charging in, thousands of them, with arrows and swords. But Leonidas picked the perfect spot. That narrow pass meant only a few enemies could attack at once. His Spartans held the terrain, the land itself, like a weapon. They didn't run around or hide. They stood firm and fought face to face. Leonidas's style was all about persistence. For days, his 300 pushed back wave after wave. They didn't need tricks. They had training. Every Spartan knew how to thrust a spear, block with a shield, and keep the line strong. It was brutal, but simple. Stand. Fight. don't break. He couldn't win forever. The Persians were too many, but he didn't have to. His job was to slow them down, and he did it by turning that pass into a meat grinder. Even when they lost, it wasn't because they ran out of guts. A traitor showed the Persians a secret path, and that's what ended it. Leonidas fought smarter, not harder, using what he had to make the enemy bleed for every step. That's classic Spartan, steady, strong, no messing around. Now flip to Spartacus. His battles? Completely different. He didn't have shields or a tight formation. He had slaves with knives, sticks, and whatever they could steal. Spartacus fought with hit-and-run raids, not open fields. Imagine this: a Roman camp at night, soldiers sleeping, thinking they're safe. Suddenly, Spartacus and his rebels sneak in, quiet, fast, deadly. They strike like lightning, an ambush out of nowhere, then vanish before the Romans can fight back. He didn't have the gear for a big stand-up battle, so he got creative. Remember that cliff escape with the vine ropes? That's how he rolled, using the terrain in sneaky ways. Hills, forests, cliffs. He turned every spot into a trap. Spartacus was resourceful. His people didn't start with swords, so they made weapons from farm tools or stole them from dead Romans. They even used fire, setting traps, or burning supplies to mess with the enemy. He had to adapt all the time because Rome kept sending bigger armies. One time, he split his group into small teams, hitting Roman supply lines from all sides. Another time, he lured soldiers into a valley and rolled rocks down on them. Spartacus didn't have Leonidas's fancy phalanx. He had chaos, but he made it work. His battles were about speed and surprise, not standing still. He turned weakness into strength by fighting on his terms, not Rome's. For 2 years, he kept winning like that, driving the empire nuts. So, what's the difference? Leonidas fought in the open, with spears and shields, holding his ground like a wall. Spartacus fought in the shadows, with knives and fire, striking and running like a wolf. Leonidas used the land to block the Persians. He was a defender. Spartacus used the land to trick the Romans. He was a hunter. One stood tall and said, "Come at me." The other crept up and said, "You'll never see me coming." Both were brilliant, but in opposite ways. Leonidas's persistence made Thermopylae a legend. Spartacus's quick thinking made Rome panic. Which would you rather face? An unbreakable line or a ghost in the dark? Here's some English from their battles. Ambush is Spartacus's surprise attacks. Terrain is the land they both used. Cliffs for Leonidas, hills for Spartacus. Adapt is what Spartacus did, changing plans to fit the fight. Resourceful is making stuff work, like his vine ropes. And persistence is Leonidas never giving up. Phrases: fight smarter, not harder. That's both of them, in different ways. Turn weakness into strength. Spartacus lived it. These are yours now. Use them to sound like a battle pro. That's the battle breakdown. Next, we'll look at their legacies, what they left behind. Get ready. It's the final showdown of their stories. Part 6, Legacy. Let's talk about what Leonidas and Spartacus left behind. Their legacies. These two didn't just fight battles. They changed how people think about bravery, even thousands of years later. First, Leonidas. His last stand at Thermopylae turned him into a symbol of patriotism. That's when someone loves their country so much, they'll die for it. Picture this: 300 Spartans facing 1,000,000 Persians, refusing to run. That image stuck. People in Greece told that story over and over, how one king and his tiny army gave everything to protect their home. Leonidas became an icon, a hero who showed what it means to stand firm. His sacrifice bought time for Greece to win the war later, and that made him immortal in history. Poets wrote about him, statues went up, and even today, we're still talking about those 300. But here's the twist: Sparta didn't last forever. After Thermopylae, Greece pushed the Persians back, but Sparta itself faded over time. Wars, politics, and new powers chipped away at it. Leonidas's legacy isn't about a kingdom that stood tall forever. It's about the idea he left. He's a martyr, someone who died for a cause and inspired others to keep fighting. His story says, hold the line, no matter what. It's not about winning every battle. It's about showing the world what courage looks like. People still look at Leonidas and think, that's how you defend what you love. His name lives forever, even if Sparta doesn't. Now, Spartacus. His legacy is different. It's all about rebellion. He didn't have a country to save. He had a system to break. Picture this: a slave with a kitchen knife, leading 70,000 people against Rome, the biggest empire around. He didn't win in the end. Rome crushed his army and nailed his rebels to crosses. But he didn't lose either. Why? Because he sparked something. For centuries after, slaves and poor people heard his name and thought, we can fight back too. Spartacus became an ideology, a belief that freedom is worth dying for. His revolt didn't topple Rome, but it shook it. Rome survived, sure, but they never forgot the slave who made their legions look weak. Spartacus's impact grew bigger over time. In history, other rebels copied him, people who said, enough, and rose up. Even today, movies and books call him the ultimate underdog, the guy who wouldn't bow. He's not just a name. He's a fire that keeps lighting up when people feel trapped. Leonidas stood for a nation, but Spartacus stood for anyone who's ever been crushed by power. His legacy says, "Break the chains, even if it costs you." He didn't build a kingdom or win a war, but he immortalized the idea that you don't need a crown to be a leader. You just need a cause. So, what's the difference? Leonidas's legacy is a shield, strong, proud, protecting something bigger than himself. He's the patriot who died so others could live free. Spartacus's legacy is a sword, sharp, wild, cutting through what's wrong. He's the rebel who lived to show the oppressed they could fight. Leonidas inspired soldiers and kings to stand tall. Spartacus inspired slaves and dreamers to rise up. One's a lesson in duty, the other's a call to revolt. Sparta fell, but Leonidas's story didn't. Rome won, but Spartacus's spirit didn't die. Which hits you more? A hero who holds the line, or one who sparks a revolution? Let's grab some English from their legacies. Icon is what Leonidas became, a symbol everyone knows. Martyr is dying for a belief, like he did. Impact is what both left behind, how they changed things. Ideology is Spartacus's big idea, freedom over everything. And immortalize is making something last forever, like their names. Phrases, live forever in history. That's Leonidas's reward. Spark a revolution. That's Spartacus's gift. These words are yours now. Use them to sound epic. Think about this. Leonidas and Spartacus fought for different things, but their legacies keep them alive. One's a rock that won't move. The other's a flame that won't go out. Next, we'll wrap up with some English lessons, grammar, vocab, and a quiz to test your warrior skills. Get ready. It's time to level up. Part 7. English Learning Focus. Now, it's time to sharpen your English skills with Leonidas and Spartacus. We've seen their battles and legacies, but today, you're the warrior. We're going to focus on some grammar and words you've heard, then test you with a quick quiz. Let's start with grammar. Past tense verbs. These tell us what happened back in history. Leonidas defended Greece at Thermopylae. That's defended. He stood strong against the Persians. Spartacus revolted against Rome. Revolted means he fought back hard. Both inspired people. Inspired is how they made others feel brave. See the pattern? Add ed to lots of verbs to talk about the past. They marched, they fought, they changed the world, all in the past tense. Practice this, and you'll tell stories like a pro. Next up, Superlatives. These are words that show the biggest, the best, the most. Leonidas was one of the bravest kings. Nobody stood firmer than him. Bravest is a superlative. It's brave plus est. Spartacus pulled off the most strategic escapes, like that vine rope trick. Most strategic means nothing beat his clever plans. You make superlatives with est for short words, like strongest, or most for longer ones, like most fearless. Try it. Who's the toughest person you know? The most amazing? That's how you sound big and bold, just like our heroes. Let's grab some key phrases too. Against all odds is perfect for both. Leonidas faced authorization. Leonidas faced 1,000,000 Persians. Crazy odds, right? Spartacus took on Rome with slaves. Impossible odds. They won anyway. Say it. Against all odds, they fought. Another one. A legacy that lasts. Leonidas's story still shines. Spartacus's fire still burns. Their legacies last forever. Use these phrases to sound epic. Say them loud. Now, vocab recap. We've got tons of words. Over 30. Defiance is saying no to fear. Leonidas and Spartacus lived it. Unity is sticking together. Spartacus's slaves showed it. Sacrifice is giving up big. Leonidas did that. Rebellion is fighting back. Spartacus started one. Phalanx is that Spartan wall. Guerrilla tactics are sneaky attacks. Honor code is Spartan rules. Liberty is freedom. Spartacus's dream. Pick your favorites and use them. Time for the quiz. Fill in the blanks. Shout your answers. Number 1. Which warrior led with a phalanx? Leonidas, right? Number 2. Who used guerrilla tactics to win? Spartacus. Number 3. Which hero said, "Come and take them"? Leonidas. So cool. Number 4. Who inspired slaves to shout, "I am Spartacus"? Spartacus, of course. Number 5. Which warrior's sacrifice saved Greece? Leonidas again. How many did you get? 5 out of 5? You're a warrior now. Let's wrap this up. These words and grammar aren't just for fun. They make you stronger. Talk about Leonidas defending his land or Spartacus revolting against chains. Say they were the bravest, the most daring. Tell your own story with "against all odds" or "a legacy that lasts." You've got the tools. Use them to sound fierce and smart. Practice this, and you'll speak English like you're leading an army. That's your English lesson. Next, we'll close it out with a bang. Leonidas versus Spartacus, the final call. Get ready to pick your winner. Here we are, the end of our epic showdown. Leonidas and Spartacus, two warriors, two legends. Picture this. On one side, Leonidas's spear slams the ground, his Spartans roaring behind him. On the other, Spartacus raises a broken chain, his rebels cheering. Their stories fade into drawings, like pages in a history book. So, what did we learn? Leonidas proved bravery means standing firm. He held Thermopylae against all odds, sacrificing everything for Greece. Spartacus showed bravery means breaking free. He turned slaves into an army, fighting for liberty with nothing but hope. One was a rock, the other a fire. Which style is yours? Do you stand tall like Leonidas or rise up like Spartacus? Now it's your turn to decide. Smash that like button if you're Team Sparta, Leonidas and his 300. Hit fire if you're Team Slave Army, Spartacus and his rebels. Drop a comment below. Who's your winner and why? Did Leonidas's discipline win you over, or Spartacus's creativity? Tell us. And don't forget, subscribe for next week's battle. Cleopatra vs. Boudica. It's going to be wild. One last thing. Think about this. Would modern heroes use Leonidas's strict rules or Spartacus's quick thinking? What's harder, fighting for your country or fighting for freedom? Chat about it in the comments. We want to hear your ideas. You've got the words now: defiance, unity, sacrifice, rebellion. Use them, be brave, and speak like a warrior. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on Learn English with Stories 365 for more stories and English.